The bell above the door chimed softly as Naomi stepped into La Maison du Ciel, one of the city's most talked-about restaurants. The air was heavy with the perfume of roasted garlic, butter, and truffle oil. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths and polished wine glasses. Naomi paused just inside, her dark coat draped neatly over her arm, her curls loose around her face. She wasn't dressed extravagantly, a simple blouse, black slacks, worn leather shoes. She carried no designer purse, no glittering jewelry. Just herself. At the front stand, the hostess glanced up from the reservation book. Her smile flickered, the kind that never reached the eyes. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes. Naomi Bennett. For one." The hostess scanned the list, found the name, and her expression smoothed, though the warmth never came. "Right this way." Naomi followed her through the dining room. Tables near the windows glowed with candlelight, occupied by laughing couples and suited businessmen. 2 tables sat empty, perfectly set, clearly held in reserve. Naomi thought for a moment she might be led to one of them. But the hostess kept walking, past the center of the room, past the warm light of the fireplace, toward the back. She stopped at a small table squeezed against the kitchen door, where the clang of pots and the bark of orders spilled out every time it swung open. "This one," the hostess said, placing a single menu down. Naomi looked at the table, then at the hostess. Around her, the restaurant hummed with polished service. Glasses of champagne clinked. Waiters leaned in to explain specials with charm. Not once had she seen anyone else seated near the swinging door. For a heartbeat, Naomi considered leaving. She could. She had done it before, walked out of places where the message was clear, "You don't belong here." But she sat down. Calmly. Deliberately. The hostess nodded curtly and walked away. Naomi placed her coat over the back of the chair, straightened her spine, and opened the menu. The door to the kitchen banged again, sending a wave of noise and steam into the corner. It was, without question, the worst table in the restaurant. Naomi smiled faintly to herself. She had been given worse in life, and turned it into something better. This would be no different. Naomi waited. And waited. At the nearby tables, servers moved like dancers, pouring wine, offering bread baskets, describing specials with polished smiles. A waiter knelt beside a couple by the window, recommending a vintage Bordeaux as though he were sharing a secret. At another table, a family received steaming baskets of bread within minutes of sitting down. Naomi glanced at her menu. No one had approached her yet. Finally, a tall young waiter appeared at her side. His posture was stiff, his smile perfunctory. He didn't introduce himself, didn't ask how she was doing. He simply stood, pen hovering over his notepad. "Ready to order?" he asked flatly. Naomi raised her brows. "I'd like to hear the specials, please." The waiter blinked, almost surprised. "Ah. Right. We've got lamb tonight. Or salmon. That's about it." He didn't elaborate. No mention of sauces, no pairings, none of the practiced poetry she'd overheard at other tables. He tapped his pen impatiently. Naomi closed the menu gently. "I'll have the salmon. And a glass of your house white." He scribbled without looking at her. "Fine." Then he turned and vanished into the dining room, stopping at the next table with a warmth she hadn't seen at hers. He leaned toward a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, voice dropping into an almost conspiratorial tone. "Our chef has a saffron risotto tonight, one of her finest. May I tempt you?" Naomi sat back in her chair, listening to the clink of glasses and bursts of laughter all around her. The kitchen door swung open behind her with a crash, nearly bumping her chair. A busboy rushed past, muttering apologies without glancing at her. Her water glass remained empty. No bread basket arrived. Naomi folded her hands in her lap. The sting was familiar. The message was familiar. She wasn't the kind of guest they believed deserved their best. But she had learned long ago, sometimes the best revenge was patience. She would let the evening play out. Because she knew, though they didn't, that the story wasn't over. The clang of pans from the kitchen rattled the thin wall behind her. Naomi shifted slightly, folding her napkin across her lap. Her water glass remained empty, but she didn't call for the waiter. Instead, she let her eyes drift across the restaurant, the polished laughter, the glitter of wine glasses, the orchestra of privilege playing all around her. Her stomach tightened with a familiar ache. She had been here before. Not here exactly, but in rooms where she was measured by her skin, her clothes, her presence. Judged before she spoke, dismissed before she could prove she belonged. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the table, steadying herself. In the hum of voices, she heard another voice rise in her mind, soft, warm, but sharp as truth. Her grandmother's. Baby girl, people will try to decide your worth before you open your mouth. They'll judge you by your hair, your skin, your shoes, anything they can. Don't let their blindness make you shrink. Your actions will tell the truth louder than they ever could. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. She remembered those nights in her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of cornbread and greens filling the air, her grandmother's hands working dough with practiced strength. The woman who had survived worse, who had carried dignity through doors slammed in her face. When Naomi opened her eyes again, she felt the same steadiness fill her chest. She could have left. She had thought about it when they stuck her by the kitchen door, when the waiter spoke to her as if she were an inconvenience. She could have walked out, never to return. But her grandmother's words anchored her. She would stay. She would eat. She would not let their smallness dictate her evening. Naomi smoothed her napkin once more, straightened her back, and let the corner of her mouth curl into the faintest of smiles. They thought they had given her the worst seat in the house. But sometimes the best stories start in the shadows. The door at the front of the restaurant swung open with a gust of cold night air. A hush rippled across the dining room, as if a subtle signal had passed from table to table. Naomi glanced up. He entered with the calm gravity of someone used to being watched, silver hair, dark overcoat, sharp eyes that missed nothing. People at nearby tables leaned in, whispering. The maitre d' nearly tripped over his own polished shoes as he rushed forward. "Mr. Harrison. An honor, sir. We have your usual table ready." Of course. Nathaniel Harrison. The food critic whose words could crown a chef or crush a restaurant in a single column. Naomi had seen his face before in magazines, smiling politely over plated masterpieces. He was the kind of guest restaurants lit their chandeliers brighter for. The staff moved with sudden urgency. A perfect table near the fireplace was cleared. Candles lit. Glasses polished again, though they already gleamed. A sommelier appeared from nowhere, cradling a bottle of wine like a newborn. Naomi sipped from her still empty glass of water and smiled faintly. The contrast was blinding. Mr. Harrison paused in the center of the room, surveying the space. The hostess gestured eagerly toward the fireplace table. "Right this way, sir." But Harrison's eyes didn't follow her hand. They scanned the room, past the glittering couples, past the reserved tables, until they landed on the shadowed corner by the kitchen door. On Naomi. A broad smile spread across his face. He ignored the waiting staff and strode directly toward her. Murmurs rippled through the dining room. Forks froze midair. The hostess blinked in confusion, still holding menus meant for him. Naomi set her napkin down gently, her composure unshaken, though her pulse quickened. When Harrison reached her table, he leaned down and kissed her cheek like an old friend. His voice rang out, clear enough for every corner of the restaurant to hear. "Naomi Bennett. My favorite chef. What a surprise." The room went still. The hostess paled. The waiter at Naomi's table nearly dropped a tray. Conversations died mid-sentence as guests turned to stare at the woman who, moments ago, had been invisible. Naomi looked up at Harrison, calm, graceful, her eyes warm with quiet power. The story was about to change. The silence in the dining room stretched thin, like glass ready to shatter. Every head had turned. Every set of eyes was locked on the corner table by the kitchen door. Nathaniel Harrison, the feared and respected critic, pulled out the empty chair across from Naomi and sat down. He didn't glance at the maitre d', the hostess, or the waiter still clutching his notepad in shock. His attention was only on her. "It's been far too long," he said warmly. "Last time I saw you was at the Paris showcase. You had 3 Michelin chefs arguing over your cassoulet." Naomi's smile was quiet, measured. "I remember. They didn't forgive me for proving them wrong." A ripple of gasps spread through the room. The name Naomi Bennett was beginning to circulate in whispers. Faces shifted from confusion to recognition, shock to disbelief. The hostess finally found her voice. You know her?" Harrison turned, his tone suddenly sharper, meant not for Naomi, but for the entire restaurant. "Know her? This is Chef Naomi Bennett, one of the most innovative restaurateurs in the country. The woman whose seasonal menus you've probably stolen ideas from. The one whose restaurants in New York and Chicago have 3-month waiting lists. The words hit the room like thunder. The hostess's face drained of color. The waiter's hand trembled, his notepad slipping. Guests leaned in, murmuring, some pulling out phones to search her name, images of her instantly lighting up their screens, awards, interviews, glowing reviews. Naomi sat still, hands folded neatly on the tablecloth, her chin slightly lifted. She didn't need to confirm a word. Her presence said enough. Harrison raised his glass of water, which the staff now scrambled to replace with wine, and smiled. It seems the finest chef in the room has been given the worst table. Interesting choice. The tension broke into frantic movement. The manager rushed forward, stammering apologies, offering to move her to the best table. The staff scattered like startled birds. But Naomi only leaned back, calm as a queen on her throne. "No need," she said softly. "This table suits me fine." In that moment, the corner by the kitchen door had become the most important seat in the restaurant. The restaurant had transformed in an instant. Where moments ago Naomi had been invisible, now the staff buzzed around her table as though she were royalty. The hostess returned, voice trembling. "Ms. Bennett, please, allow us to move you to a more comfortable table by the fireplace." Naomi lifted a hand gently. "I'm fine here." The hostess froze, swallowed, and backed away. Her waiter reappeared, posture suddenly bent with deference. "Ma'am, may I recommend our chef's truffle risotto? It would pair beautifully with—" Naomi's eyes flicked to him, calm but cutting. "I asked for salmon. I'll have it as I ordered." "Yes, of course," he stammered, retreating like a soldier dismissed. The manager himself came rushing over, sweat glistening on his forehead, a glass of the restaurant's most expensive vintage in his hand. "Chef Bennett, please accept this as a token of our deepest apologies." Naomi looked at the glass, then at the man. Hospitality isn't about apologies after the fact. It's about respect from the start. He lowered the glass, his smile faltering. Naomi leaned back, her expression serene. She picked up her fork when her dish finally arrived and tasted the salmon with deliberate calm. It was good, properly seasoned, perfectly seared, but she ate without comment, letting the room's silence stretch around her. At every other table, conversation had dimmed. Guests watched her carefully, sensing that something bigger than dinner was happening. A few seemed embarrassed, others curious, a few downright ashamed. Nathaniel Harrison smiled across the table at her, then spoke loudly enough for the staff to hear. "Excellence doesn't need a better table. It creates one wherever it sits." Naomi dabbed her mouth with her napkin and set it down with quiet grace. She didn't gloat. She didn't scold. She let the weight of her composure speak louder than any outburst could. The staff hovered anxiously, waiting for a chance to repair what they had broken. But Naomi had no need for their redemption. She had already claimed her dignity the moment she refused to move. The corner table, once the worst in the house, had become the room's crown jewel. The last bite of salmon was gone, the plate cleared with the reverence of holy relics. Naomi rose slowly from her chair, draping her coat across her arm. Around her, the entire dining room seemed to hold its breath. The manager hovered nearby, wringing his hands. "Ms. Bennett, please, we hope you'll forgive tonight's oversight. It won't happen again." Naomi regarded him steadily. Her voice was even, not cruel, but undeniable. "It should never have happened at all. Respect isn't reserved for names you recognize." The words struck deeper than any raised tone could. The manager lowered his eyes, unable to answer. Nathaniel Harrison stood and placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, turning toward the nearest cluster of journalists and diners who had gathered, phones in hand, recording every word. His voice carried easily across the hushed restaurant. "Remember this night. Hospitality isn't about chandeliers, or the table by the fire. It isn't about who looks wealthy or famous. It's about dignity and respect, given to every guest who walks through the door." The applause began softly, from a young server near the bar, then from a couple at the center of the room, until half the restaurant was clapping. The other half sat silent, chastened. Naomi didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply nodded once, her crown invisible but undeniable, and walked toward the front doors. The hostess who had led her to the kitchen corner stood stiffly, eyes wide with shame. Naomi paused beside her, voice low but clear. The worst table can become the best seat in the house, if you learn who you're serving. With that, Naomi stepped out into the night air, her stride calm, steady, unshaken. The doors closed behind her, leaving the restaurant forever changed. Inside, the staff exchanged stunned glances. Outside, Naomi lifted her chin to the cool night breeze. She had walked in dismissed, seated in shadows. She left as the brightest presence in the room. The crowned guest.